Welcome to CSGuitars, the science of loud. This BC Rich Bronze Series Warlock is here for an upcoming project, although I've hit a little bit of a stumbling block. The frets on this are garbage. It was in cleaning and restringing this instrument in preparation for the project that I discovered that at several points across the neck, notes either buzz out or die entirely. This guitar, as it stands, is unplayable. A setup didn't solve the issue. The neck is straight, the action is set, so we can rule those out as being the culprits. I've had to concede that the frets are just messed up, uneven and kinda shit. Some of them were even lifting on the bass side. I had to hammer them back into place, and one of them even looks like someone has tried to repair a dent by filling it with solder. Now you might be thinking, but Colin, can't you just level them? And I wish that were the case. Unfortunately, the frets on here weren't very tall to begin with, and with as many points across the neck needing attention, by the time we get them all level, I don't think there's going to be any frets left to speak of. There simply isn't enough material here to survive the amount of correction this needs. So we're going to have to pull all the old ones out and put new ones in. I didn't really want to have to do this. Pulling frets and putting new ones in is a time-consuming process, it's a lot of work, and it risks damaging the fretboard if I'm not careful. This is far too much effort for a £100 guitar that's frankly only here for what should have been a quick and fun project. Furthermore, while levelling and recrowning an established fret job is a fairly straightforward process and something that I'm well practiced in, I don't have as much confidence or experience with complete removal and reinstalling of frets. But we don't get better at a skill without practicing it, so let's start the extraction. Let's be clear up front. My intention is to get in and out of this one as quickly as possible while still doing a reasonable fret job. It doesn't have to be the most perfect, pristine, beautiful fretwork I've ever seen, it just needs to be functional and allow the guitar to play without any of the nonsense we heard previously. I'm working with the bare minimal tools here, so I'm well aware I'm doing things the hard way. This is not going to be a demonstration of best practice or the easiest fret job. If anything, this will show you what can be accomplished with few tools and little skill. Perhaps the Patreon funding from this video will go towards new tools for next time. You can sign up and support projects like this at patreon.com/CSGuitars. Link is in the description. To get these frets out, we first need to heat them up. This does two things. Firstly, it will soften any glue that was used when the frets were installed, making for easier removal. And secondly, heating the wood immediately surrounding the frets helps prevent wood chips tearing out as the fret barbs are pulled clear. I've modified this old soldering iron to run along the fret tops. I simply filed a contour into the underside of this flat tip with a small round file. This goes a long way to preventing the iron slipping off the frets and burning the wood. I'm using fret cutters to remove the frets. These are a good multi-purpose tool, as you'll see going forward. The head of the cutters is wide and ground flush, which is really important in the extractions. At no point am I pulling the frets. I'm keeping the cutters in contact with the fretboard at all times and simply closing the jaws, which applies upwards pressure on the fret, lifting it out of its slot. I just walk the cutters along the length of the fret until it's completely removed. Ensuring the face of the cutter never leaves the fretboard helps to mitigate against wood tear out. There's always a wide metal surface pushing down on the wood as the frets are lifted out. Attempting to pull the fret with the cutters would only result in a lot of time spent trying to glue chunks of fretboard back into place. I managed to remove all of the frets in this fashion with 0 wood chips, which is a significantly good result. But we still need to clean up all of the old surface glue and prep the board for new frets. I've determined that this board has a roughly 14-inch radius and can therefore use my 14-inch sanding block with 600 grit sandpaper to lightly go over the whole fretboard, knocking down any issues and removing any crusty glue residue. The sandpaper isn't aggressive enough to really reshape the board. This is just a surface skimming pass. I'll hit the freshly prepped board with some D'Addario Hydrate for now, but later I'll go and give it a coat of tung oil for a proper water-resistant finish. It's not just the surface that has signs of old glue and assorted debris. The slots themselves need cleaned out to ensure that nothing is hiding down there that will prevent the fret seating correctly. I'm using a craft blade, which is the appropriate thickness to scrape out any loose gunk from the slots. The new fret wire itself is taller than what I removed, but a tad narrower. Fret wire comes in a great many dimensions. This just happens to be what I had lying around. This size would be a good approximation for traditional Gibson or Fender style instruments. Modern metal guitars usually have taller and wider frets than this, but by any rate it's going to be better than what we removed. The straight fret wire needs to be bent to the radius of the board it will be installed in. There are jigs that you can buy or make that will quickly and accurately bend the wire into a calculated radius, but I don't have one of these. There are also hand tools which are designed to support the wire if you're bending by hand, but I don't have those either. Instead, I'm grasping the tang of the fret wire with the fret cutters and slowly and methodically bending the wire into the appropriate radius, which is a shade tighter than the board. Bending to a slightly tighter radius helps prevent the fret ends popping back out of the slots, making for an easier installation. I then cut the fret wire to length, measuring it against each slot, as the length of the fret will increase as we progress up the neck. I can't just start hammering in the frets as they are. The tang, that's the barbed part that seats into the slot, needs to be nipped at either end and filed flush with a little fret end dressing file. This is a tedious and time-consuming process, and I'm sure there is a tool that would do this all in one neat pass, but again, I'm working with minimal equipment. Once prepared, each fret receives a tiny bead of superglue along the tang. I realise applying the glue to the slot would probably make more sense, but I find that it never goes in the bloody slot when I try this, and I end up having to clean up a mess of superglue off the fretboard. Applying the glue directly to the fret gives me better results. Frets are then hammered in using a brass-faced dead blow hammer. The brass face is softer than the nickel frets, and the impact will deform the hammer face, not the fret. If you tried to hammer in frets using a standard steel hammer, you'd end up with a perfect hammer and dented frets. The technique I try to use here is to tap each end in turn and then walk the strikes across the fret. This should lock in the ends, and as the middle is driven down, it pushes the ends laterally, removing the upwards path the tang took as it was inserted. With this, the end should hopefully never lift back out of the slot. I'm cleaning up any glue squeeze out with a toothpick, and I'll go back later once everything is in place and scrape off any excess glue with a scalpel blade. The frets are now all in place, but we are very far from being complete. I need to snip all the ends and then take my levelling file and refine the edges. These need to be brought down to the wood surface and a bevel added, otherwise we'd slice our hands to pieces trying to play the thing. This takes a lot of care to get right, but by the end I should be able to run my hand up and down the neck without giving myself any lacerations. We can go a step further in tidying these fret ends by using the small fret end file. This has a rounded surface on the bottom and toothed sides, allowing me to roll the file around the fret ends without damaging the wood. This is another tedious process that some luthiers take to extremes in order to get perfectly rounded ends. I'm not going to expend that much effort here, but I'm going to make these look nice and remove any possibility of little sharp edges that may catch our hand while playing. You'll notice that I've been doing a lot of this with the neck braced against my body. I find this to be a very secure hold for bolt-on necks and gives me a lot of control over both my tools and seeing what I'm doing. Certainly beats leaning over my makeshift workbench. It's time to start levelling the frets. With the fret tops marked, I'll shoot the 14-inch sanding block over them using a fresh section of 600 grit. This is again a skim pass, just to see how even these frets are and where extra work may be needed. Happily, the red markings were removed in an almost uniform manner, so there isn't much work to do. I'm checking the whole neck with the fret rocker, a tool that spans 3 frets and will rock if the fret in the middle is too high. Fortunately, there are only a couple of points where a small movement happens. The leveling file will make short work of these areas. At this point, I'm happy everything is level. Now we must recrown the frets to return them to their rightful round shape. This will get messy, hence the green tape protecting the fretboard. Fret tops are marked and we can get to work with the fret dressing files, rounding over the profile, leaving only a thin red line on the top of the fret. As I've shown before with this process, I'm using the triangle file for the bulk of the work and then the concave file for a final refinement. With that achieved, all that's left is to polish up these frets. Getting a mirror shine on these will cut down the resistance between the fret and the string, making bends easier and notes clearer. I'm moving through sandpaper to abrasive impregnated erasers and finally onto my sequence of polishing pads for a wet pass. By the end of all of this, the frets are looking lustrous. One setup later and the guitar is looking fresh, but the real proof of all of this will be how it plays. A functional fretboard without any dead spots or weird bends is what I'm looking for. As you could hear from that little demonstration, all of the frets are now working as intended, and interestingly, this instrument now plays and sounds like a completely different guitar. It's amazing how much difference a good fret job will make. Now, the work that was done here in materials, tools and time are worth more than the instrument itself, so perhaps it's not surprising that this now plays better than it likely ever did. Certainly there are some points that could have been neater or perhaps even done better, but a functional fret job is all I need to take this guitar into the project I have planned for it. With the instrument as it stands, we'll be going into that project at a high point, but with everything I intend to do to this, we'll be going downhill very quickly from there, so make sure you're subscribed so you can see what happens to this Warlock in the very near future. Thanks once again to my Patreon supporters for making this video possible. If you want to help fund projects like this and support the type of videos I make on this channel, then please do consider signing up for Patreon. Link is in the description. Don't forget to click all the buttons you're supposed to make this video viable to the ever-changing whims of the YouTube algorithm. But that's all for now. Keep it loud and stay safe.